Okay, I need to ask you something before we get into today's conversation. Have you ever stayed somewhere you should have left? Not because you wanted to, but because leaving felt more terrifying than staying? Because you didn't know where you'd go. Because you were afraid no one would believe you. Because you loved someone in that situation even though the situation itself was destroying you. If the answer is yes, even a little bit yes, this one's for you. Today we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed enough in the relationship psychology space, and that's what happens after a toxic or harmful relationship ends. Not the leaving part, everyone talks about the leaving. We're talking about what comes after. The part where you're out, you're free, and you have absolutely no idea who you are anymore or how to start over. We're talking about the shame spiral that shows up even when you did nothing wrong. The way trauma rewires how you see yourself. Why rebuilding takes so much longer than people expect. And what the research actually says about recovering your sense of self after you've been through something that was never your fault. This is also a conversation about secure attachment, specifically what happens to your attachment patterns when your sense of safety has been completely shattered, and how you actually rebuild that foundation. In yourself first. Then in relationships, if you've been carrying something heavy, and you're not sure where to even begin, stay with me, because this conversation might be exactly where you need to start. And if this channel is new to you, subscribe and turn on notifications. We do this every single week. Now let's get into it. Part 1. Why people stay silent after being hurt. Let's start here because I think this is the piece that's most misunderstood. When someone goes through something traumatic, especially inside a relationship or a family, the most common question people ask from the outside is, why didn't you say something sooner? And I get why people ask that. Seems logical. If something bad is happening to you, you tell someone. Simple. But here's what the psychology actually tells us, and this is really important. Silence after trauma is not a character flaw. It's a survival response. When you're in a situation where speaking up feels more dangerous than staying quiet, whether that's because you fear losing people you love, fear not being believed, fear retaliation, fear judgment, your brain makes a calculation. And that calculation is, staying quiet keeps me safer right now than speaking up. That's not weakness. That's your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect you. The problem is that silence, while it protects you in the short term, tends to cost you enormously in the long term. Because when we can't speak our experience out loud, we start internalizing it. We start believing that what happened to us is somehow our fault. We start carrying the shame of someone else's actions as if it belongs to us. And that's where the real psychological damage happens. Not in the event itself, as terrible as it was, but in the story we start telling ourselves about what the event means about who we are. The research on trauma and self-blame is pretty clear on this. People who experience harm in the context of a relationship, especially one where there was trust and dependence, are significantly more likely to blame themselves than people who experience harm from strangers. Because when it's someone close, there's this devastating logic the brain follows. If someone who was supposed to love me did this, maybe I did something to deserve it. Maybe I am what they said I was. That logic is not true, but it feels true. And that feeling can last for years if nobody names it and addresses it directly. Takeaway number 1. If you have ever stayed silent about something that hurt you because you were afraid of not being believed, of losing someone, of what would happen next, that silence was not a failure. It was a response to real fear. And you are allowed to name what happened to you on your own timeline, in a space that feels safe enough to do that. Starting with yourself. Part 2. What happens to your sense of self after deep betrayal? Okay. So let's talk about what betrayal trauma actually does to a person. Because I think most people don't realize how structural this is, how it actually changes the architecture of how you see yourself in the world. When betrayal comes from someone close, someone you trusted, someone you depended on, it doesn't just hurt. It disorients. It makes you question your own perception of reality. You start asking, how did I not see this? What else am I wrong about? Can I trust my own judgment at all? This is called hypervigilance after betrayal, and it's incredibly common. Your brain, having been blindsided once, goes into overdrive trying to make sure it never happens again. So you start second-guessing everything. You start watching for threats everywhere. You start feeling unsafe in situations that are actually fine. And on top of that, there's the shame. Shame is one of the most psychologically toxic emotions we experience, and it's different from guilt. Guilt says I did something bad. Shame says I am bad. And when something terrible happens to you and you can't talk about it, shame tends to fill the silence. It becomes the explanation your brain reaches for when it can't make sense of what happened. The woman in today's story describes feeling dirty, feeling worthless, feeling like she had no value left. And I want to be really clear about something. Those feelings were the natural psychological response to an unnatural, harmful situation. They were not evidence that she was actually those things. They were evidence that she had been through something that no person should go through. One of the most important pieces of work in trauma recovery is learning to separate what happened to you from who you are. These are not the same thing. What happened to you is an event. Who you are is something much deeper and much more permanent than any single event, no matter how devastating. Dr. Judith Herman, one of the foremost researchers on trauma recovery, puts it this way. Recovery from trauma is not about forgetting what happened. It's about restoring a sense of a present self that is capable of a future. You don't have to erase the past. You just have to stop letting it be the only story you have about yourself. Takeaway number 2. If you have been through something that left you feeling worthless, dirty, or like you'll never be the same, those feelings make complete sense given what you experienced. But they are not the truth about who you are. They are the wound. And wounds with the right care can heal. Not disappear, heal. There's a difference. And healing is possible. Part 3. The decision to leave. And why it's never as simple as just leave. I want to spend some time here because I think the just leave conversation does a lot of harm. People on the outside of difficult situations often think leaving is straightforward. You're unhappy, you leave. Simple. But the psychology of leaving a harmful or toxic situation, especially when you have financial dependence, emotional attachment, children, shared housing, or social pressure, is anything but simple. Leaving requires that you believe on some level that you deserve better. And when your sense of self-worth has been damaged by the situation itself, by things people have said to you, by shame and isolation, that belief is often the first thing to go. Leaving also requires that you have somewhere to go. Somewhere safe. And for a lot of people, that somewhere simply doesn't exist. And leaving, for many women especially, comes with a particular social terror, the fear of not being believed. The fear that if you speak the truth, people will take the other side. That you'll lose your community, your family, your reputation. That you'll be seen as the problem rather than the person who was harmed. So people stay. Not because they're weak, but because the cost of leaving in that specific moment, in that specific situation, feels unsurvivable. What eventually creates the tipping point for most people is not a sudden burst of courage. It's usually one of two things. Either the situation becomes so untenable that staying starts to feel more dangerous than leaving, or something shifts in how the person sees themselves. A small moment of clarity, a glimpse of a different future, a conversation that reaches them in the right way at the right time. The woman in today's story left with no plan. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stay. And that moment of moving toward the unknown because the known had become unbearable, is one of the most quietly heroic things a person can do. It didn't look heroic. Probably felt like panic. But it was the beginning of her actual life. Takeaway number 3. If you are in a situation you know you need to leave but you haven't yet, the reason you haven't left is not because you're weak or stupid or making excuses. The reason is that leaving is genuinely hard, the barriers are real, and your nervous system is doing its best to keep you alive in a situation that feels unsafe. When you're ready and when you have enough safety to do it, you will. And if you need help getting there, please reach out to a professional or a crisis resource. You don't have to figure this out alone. Before we keep going, if any of this is landing for you today, please hit the like button. It helps this content reach the people who need it most. Share this with someone you care about who might be carrying something heavy right now. And subscribe if you haven't, because this is the kind of conversation we have here every single week. Okay, let's keep going. Part 4. Rebuilding when you have nothing left. Here's the part nobody talks about enough. After you leave, after the crisis, after the immediate danger is over, you're standing there with, in some cases, literally nothing. No money, no support system, no plan, no idea who you are outside of the situation you just escaped. And everyone expects you to be relieved, to be grateful, to start putting your life back together. And you're just exhausted, scared, not sure you can do this. The research on post-traumatic recovery actually has a lot to say about this phase. And the most important thing it tells us is that rebuilding after trauma is not linear and it is not fast. It doesn't follow the timeline that other people expect. And comparing your recovery to someone else's, or to some imagined version of how quickly you should be getting better, is one of the most damaging things you can do to yourself in this phase. The woman in today's story spent months just trying to survive. Physically, financially, she made decisions she wasn't proud of. She found herself in situations she never imagined she'd be in. And I think it's really important to say this out loud. Making difficult choices in impossible circumstances is not a moral failing. It's what survival looks like sometimes. There's a concept in psychology called moral injury, and it's distinct from regular trauma. Moral injury happens when you're forced to act in ways that violate your own values, not because you chose to, but because your circumstances gave you no other option. And it can leave people feeling a deep, complicated sense of shame and self-disgust that's separate from the original trauma. The treatment for moral injury is not self-condemnation. It's context. Understanding the full picture of what was happening, what options actually existed, what pressure you were under, what resources you did and didn't have. When you see the whole picture, not just the decision but everything surrounding it, judgment tends to soften. Both from yourself and from others. She kept going. That's the headline. With a newborn, with no money, with no support, with a body that wasn't fully recovered, she kept going. Not because it was easy or because she had some magical reserve of strength, but because her kid needed her to, and that turned out to be enough to keep moving. Takeaway number 4. If you are in the rebuilding phase right now and it feels impossibly slow, or like you're making wrong decisions, or like you should be further along by now, please be patient with yourself. Rebuilding from real damage takes real time. And every single day that you keep showing up, for yourself and for whoever depends on you, is not nothing. It is everything. Part 5. Secure attachment starts with yourself. I want to close with this because I think it's the most important thing and also the thing that gets missed the most. When we talk about secure attachment at Secure Love Psychology, the ability to feel safe in relationships, to trust, to be vulnerable without being destroyed by it, we usually frame it in the context of relationships with other people. And that's important. But there's a foundation that has to come first. Secure attachment with yourself. This means trusting your own perception of reality, believing that your feelings are valid information, not overreactions. Knowing that you are worthy of care, not because of what you do or produce or look like, but just because you exist. Having some basic confidence that you can handle what comes at you, even when it's hard. Trauma damages all of these things. It makes you distrust your own perception because if you trusted someone who hurt you, maybe your judgment is just broken. It makes you dismiss your own feelings because feeling them is painful and you've had to survive by disconnecting from them. It makes you feel fundamentally unworthy because shame is one of trauma's most reliable side effects. And it makes you feel terrifyingly fragile because you've already been through something that proved the world can be more dangerous than you thought. Rebuilding secure attachment with yourself is slow work. It doesn't happen all at once. But here's what it looks like in practice. It looks like noticing when you're being harsh to yourself and asking, would I say this to someone I loved? It looks like letting yourself feel something without immediately shutting it down. It looks like making one small decision that is genuinely for you, not for approval, not for survival, just for you, and honoring it. It looks like telling one person one true thing about what you've been through, and letting their response remind you that you are not alone, and you are not unlovable. The woman in today's story is still in the middle of it. She hasn't arrived at some tidy ending. She's rebuilding day by day with a kid and a business she's trying to grow and a past that she's still processing. And that is honestly the most relatable and the most real version of healing there is. It's not a montage. It's just Tuesday, and then Wednesday, and then Thursday. Takeaway number 5. Healing your relationship with yourself is not a project you complete. It's a practice you return to. And every time you choose yourself, your safety, your truth, your needs, over the voice that says you don't deserve it, you are doing the work. It counts, even when it doesn't feel like enough. Okay, let's bring it home. Today we talked about something that doesn't fit neatly into a self-help framework. There's no 5-step program for what this woman went through. There's no quick fix for the kind of damage that comes from deep betrayal, from losing your sense of self, from having to rebuild your entire life from scratch with a baby and no support system. But here's what we do know from the research. And here's what I want you to carry from today. 1. Staying silent after being hurt is not weakness. It's a survival response. And you get to tell your story on your own timeline. 2. What happened to you is not who you are. Shame fills the silence after trauma, but it is not the truth. The truth is that you are more than the worst thing that ever happened to you. 3. Leaving is hard. The barriers are real. And when you're ready and when it's safe, you will. There's no shame in the timeline it takes. 4. Rebuilding is slow, nonlinear, and sometimes ugly. You will make decisions in the hard middle that you won't be proud of. That's what survival looks like sometimes. Context matters. Be generous with yourself. 5. Secure love, the kind we build with partners, with children, with friends, starts with secure attachment to yourself. And that means trusting your own experience, honoring your own needs, and believing, even when it's hard, that you are worth the care you keep giving to everyone else. The woman in today's story is still going, still figuring it out, still showing up for her kid every single day. And if you are in the middle of your own version of this, your own hard chapter that doesn't have a clean ending yet, I want you to know that the fact that you're still here, still trying, still showing up, that matters. That is not nothing. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's one thing that has helped you rebuild your sense of self after going through something really hard? It could be anything, a person, a habit, a realization, a moment. I read every comment, and your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Share this with someone who's in a hard chapter right now, not to fix anything, just to let them know they're not alone. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do that now. New episode every week. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next week.